Yeah, I was 7 years old. That was the first team I ever watched was the 1982 team, and it's hard to come up with a better example of a team to have as your first team. I mean, the team was so enjoyable. There's a player named Ozzy for crying out loud. Like, what was the Wizard of Oz? Every 7-year-old would love that. But the team was so fast and stealing bases and playing defense, and they won the World Series. If you were looking for a way to be specifically designed to be obsessed with baseball the rest of your life, having your first baseball team be the 1982 Cardinals was a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah, I know your first game, age 7, you go there. What was the fan experience like? How did that team take over the city?
Yeah, it was, remember, it had been the year before, Ozzie Smith had actually played for San Diego. He'd been traded for Gary Templeton, who had actually been yanked off the field, as the documentary shows, by Whitey Herzog for making obscene gestures to the fans, if you're wondering how different baseball was in 1981 in St. Louis. But then Ozzie Smith comes on and he runs onto the field, he does somersaults, he does flips, he's diving in the hole, and then you've got Willie McGee, and you've got Keith Hernandez was on that team. Joaquin Andaharo, I think he's actually one of the key figures in the documentary, very beloved player on that team that passed away a few years ago. That really felt like baseball in a way that people had not seen before. Like, that team stole 3 times as many bases as they hit home runs. And frankly, it's really a style of baseball we haven't seen much since.
What was your favorite part of the documentary, or is there a favorite personality that stood out to you?
Yeah, getting to see Ozzie Smith talk, he had actually had a bit of a rift with the Cardinals until fairly recently. Having him talk about those years is great. But for me, it's really seeing Whitey Herzog. Whitey Herzog is 88 years old. He's still around. He's still as feisty and ornery as he was back when he was running Whitey Ball. To hear him kind of talk about how that team was constructed, I mean, we talk about the trades that the Mariners have made, how then Dipoto is always trading people around. Herzog remade that entire team. He traded Raleigh Fingers and Ted Williams, Ted Simmons, 2 future Hall of Famers right before that season, got a prospect that never panned out, and still beat that team in the World Series. He was the riverboat gambler. To see Whitey Herzog really talk openly about that team, he's old, he's ornery, he's complaining about all the prima donnas today in a way that you would totally want Whitey Herzog to be. It's a really enjoyable part. Another fun part of the documentary, John Hamm. John Goodman narrates the documentary, but John Hamm is basically kind of the kid that was watching the teams at that time. He remembers those teams very vividly, and I assure you, gets a snarl on his face when he says the words Don Dickinger. There's no question that happens.
So John Hamm's playing you, we could say. You as a kid as well, right?
That's
how we can script
less
it.
handsome, obviously, but yes.
So you talked about the brand of baseball that they played, and it's so different from today's game. Not many home runs. They were towards the bottom on the leaderboard back then, and there weren't as many home runs anyway, and they stole bases like crazy, contact to all fields. So does that brand of baseball still work in today's game? What I'm saying is, let's take the 80s Cardinals, pick a year, 85, and place them in 2020. How do they do?
Yeah, that's a question that a lot of people in the documentary actually talk about. Keith Hernandez kind of goes on a fun riff about this, of trying to imagine what it would look like today. I don't know if anyone thinks it would. I think everyone, they played that style, so they, of course, think it would be really successful. I think more to the point, they think it would drive people insane. They think the pitchers would totally lose their mind with these runners going all over the place. There's a clear sense of everyone involved, not just that the game was played differently then, but even the way it is now. It's a more deliberate, a more kind of slower station-to-station game. There was an excitement, clearly watching the documentary. It was exciting to watch this team play, but it was obviously exciting to actually play this style of baseball. Would it work today? I don't know. There's not a lot of AstroTurf around anymore. You can't. There really is not any Ozzie Smith sort of character around. But you know what? I have to say, for variety's sake, I would love to see someone try, because it certainly would be a pretty dramatic contrast with the way things look right now.
I'm with you. I'm dying for someone to go against the power brand of baseball and just see what happens. Will, thank you very much. We'll all be watching later on, 8 o'clock Eastern. MLB Network presents on the 80s Cardinals, and we'll bring it here in Smoltzy. I mean, I know you would love to see that brand of baseball in today's game.
Yeah, especially now that I'm retired. I had to face that brand of baseball, and it doesn't do you any favors as a pitcher. There's too much you have to worry about. There would be no shifts. There would be not a lot of strikeouts. They might be overmatched at times, but their speed never slumps. And that's the one thing that you could make an argument. You might say their hitting and their angles of which they tried to hit may not compete with the velocity that exists today, but I'll tell you right now, it would force pitchers to throw strikes. It would force pitchers to worry about the running game, and you would score a lot more runs without a hit. And I just think, thinking about that club in today, if you shifted against them, you lose, right? you better strike them out. You better find a way to them not to get on base, because if they get on base, and I get the argument of today you'd have more strikeouts just like you're going to have more homers by the philosophy, but it would be a tremendous challenge for the way the game is being taught from a pitcher standpoint, because the idea of changing speeds and hitting your spots, which was back then very important, would not be a strength of many pitchers today. And so it would feed into what they're good at doing, drawing walks, getting singles, and turning a single into possibly a triple.
And I agree, as long as the talent level was there to make contact and to do those things and then get on base and create the traffic, do you think that that would play?
Well, the havoc they created was really fun to watch, but it wasn't reckless. That's the thing that struck me when I looked at the stolen base numbers. I picked the 1985 Cardinals. I think that was the best team of the group, even though they didn't win. They're a replay challenge away. Sorry, John Hamm and Will Leitch, but they did not win the World Series. But check out these stolen base numbers and look at the high percentage. We value now 75% or higher in order to make the stolen base worth it from a sabermetric perspective. Well, look at all these guys. They had 5 guys. I'm not counting Joaquin Andor, but look how pitchers stole 3 bases for that 1985 Cardinals team. They had 5 guys that stole at least 30 bases, 75% or higher. There were only 8 players in all of Major League Baseball that did that last year. This is a special team that wasn't just reckless. They were good at what they did.
And that's back when the pitchers were taught to be as quick as they can and pay attention to the running game. Where today, that's not even. I'm so amazed in the 9th inning why no one steals on the closer is beyond belief, because he's not even paying attention. He's got a slow move. They would have a field day if they got on base against a lot of pitchers today.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was managing a young manager coming along when the Cardinals were there, and as a young manager, you sort of look at what's going on and what lights your fire, and you said, hey, if you've got a team that has some speed, you're going to run. And I remember coming to camp with Earl Weaver, and he played just the opposite. Earl Weaver was the old school. And I'd come to spring training and he'd say, yeah, he said, you can take that and put it where the sun doesn't shine. And I'll tell you why, because we're not stealing third base. We're waiting on the 3-run homer. St. Louis was tough, and I could argue that they could come in today's game and compete because they could hit, they could run, they turned walks into triples, every extra base hit, they always were putting pressure on you. They had a couple of guys in that lineup that could hit homers. Jack Clark was a homer hitter. Keith Hernandez was a good hitter. I mean, so they had a pretty good balance, and they had a guy at the end of the game in Bruce Sutter that could close it up. So I loved that team.
I miss the speed. So why isn't there as much speed nowadays in the game? Is it because when we're evaluating young players, if they're missing enough pop in the bat, then they don't even make it up to the show?
Yeah, there's a lot of arguments as it's kind of gone along. I mean, obviously it's gone to the power. I think that you're seeing a different kind of player that they're drafting that's coming out. I think there are times where you have it. I think there's some good young players that can run. I think that right now they're holding them back. I don't think it's something that they're teaching. We don't want to get a guy hurt in the minor leagues. They're racing them up to the big leagues. And, it's not something there's a deliberate, we're not going to look for speed guys. I think you want them. But at the end of the day, the guy's got to be able to hit a little bit. And, you take a guy like Vince Coleman. I saw him young. I never thought he was going to make it. I saw him in the minor leagues. I said, this guy can't hit. Willie McGee got moved around, never a great hitter. They got to the big leagues and hit enough.
And Smolty's even saying it bothered him. I mean, it's easy when you don't have to worry about anybody running. It's a whole other factor in the game.
I know we have all the metrics that quantify as much as we can. I still don't understand, if you have that component, why you wouldn't utilize that component to make it tougher. And I just think that, the athlete in our game is constructed differently. They're not even given the opportunity to utilize all their tools because we bunch people together to accomplish a goal versus imagine having Ozzie Smith. That's your separator. You don't get many of those guys. He doesn't need to, he's your shift. Whereas now we've taken a lot of great shortstops that could be close to Ozzie playing out of position because the rules allow you to put everyone in an area where everyone is kind of programmed to play a certain way. So it's when you got a player like that, you used to have an edge as an organization. Now the edge has disappeared because of the shift. And I think that is a big part of it too, that you can now take the average short second baseman that played back there probably doesn't have the arm to play in the shifts that you need now, 2 kind of shortstops. So I get the give and take, but I'm telling you, there's a couple teams that are going to try and do it a little differently, and you'll see the variety start coming back in if they can coerce a great athlete with that potential to not go to another sport.
Every time there's a Billy Hamilton that comes up, I'm like, please hit enough so we can see you on the base paths just going crazy, causing problems. So check that out. We'll all be watching 8 o'clock Eastern this evening on the 80s Cardinals.